boy, does it not feel like that when you start, because actually the business is running you.
One of the biggest barriers to implementing this type of working is the trust of the line manager in their people.
Why are you doing it and what brings you joy about it? And giving yourself time to take those joyful moments.
We asked for questions to be sent in, and one of those is on hybrid working. So I'm going to ask this to our experts. It says, how can I find out if hybrid working is suitable for my business? So, Deborah, it's not right for everybody, but what are the sort of key indicators that it might be a good idea?
Well, they might have had a trial period, of course, because there was a time when we were pretty much working from home in any event. For me, hybrid working is probably applicable to an awful lot of industries and an awful lot of businesses. More, everybody's was terrified of it, and actually we proved it can work very, very well, provided we get it right. I think the most important thing for me is not how much time or does it work people working from home, because I think demonstrably, as long as you have the right systems and the right touch points in place, it does. How do you keep your team together? How do you still feel part of an organisation when you're not coming into the office as often as possible? Otherwise, you're just a group of disparate people doing their individual jobs. So I do think it's important to build in, it's not how much you work at home, it's what your touch points are. Whether they're physical touch points, whether or not they can still be through the screen. So designing a system that says not only can we monitor the work, not only can we monitor the people, and I mean that in a good wellbeing sort of way, how do we know how they're doing, and how often do we need to actually come together to make sure that we are still a team, and what we're being told is the reality, because a lot of us can mask things through a screen. It's when you get in a room, you can see body language, you can see all of the unspoken stuff going on. So I do still advocate actually getting together at certain times.
Just taking that one step further, I was hybrid working way back in the 90s when it wasn't even a thing. But quite often, you'd get a phone call and miss it, and someone would assume that you'd gone and done your shopping, that you were skiving. There has to be a level of trust. There has to be a balance between going into the office or workplace, but there also needs to be trust on both sides, doesn't there?
Yes, and you're right. And does it really matter that you've just gone off to do your shopping as long as you get your job done? So I think that's where that building that trust comes in. I can remember before the pandemic, I maybe worked from home one day a week, but I would never have a delivery done on the day I was working from home, because I didn't want to have to say, I'm just going to open the door to the delivery driver. Now everyone says, I'm just going to open the door to the delivery driver. So I think our culture's gradually changed, and I think you just have to go with that. But yes, if they want to open the door to delivery, or they want to take the kids to school, if you've got that agreement in place when they'll make that up, as long as they're getting the job done, I think we need to be less prescriptive about the hours they put in.
From a health and safety, from a HR perspective, of course, there are certain criteria that people would need to meet working from home, not least of all insurance, make sure the equipment's right. Do they pay their own gas and electricity bills for the time that they're working in their own home office? It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it?
It is, but it's like everything. You can make it work if you choose to make it work. All the guidance is there on the government website for the conditions that you need to put in place. June would pull me up if I didn't mention health and safety. You indicated to it, so doing the desktop assessment, etc., on the workplace is really, really important. The one thing I'd like to emphasise, though, it goes back to the earlier point around trust, is one of the biggest barriers to implementing this type of working is the trust of the line manager in their people. And the thing I always say to people, you're worried about somebody taking advantage of the situation, and that person you're worried about, they're already taking advantage. You're addressing the wrong issue there. Is deal with the problem, manage for your 99% and deal with the 1%, because trust in people generally pays back.
Deborah, we've recognised some of the issues that point a finger towards in terms of well-being, but how do we track them? How do we keep on top of them and track well-being in the workplace?
You need systems that actually check in on the things, the actions that you've agreed. So you're tracking. There's two different things here. There's the processes. This is what we set out to do. How far are we down on that process? Because I'm guessing, and you guys are working in it every day, it's for an ever-changing thing. Your job isn't done, isn't it? You know, you're evolving processes all of the time. So I think that's tracking where you as an organisation are in terms of the processes. And part of those processes is how do we check in on the individuals? And that surely, and I am going to pass over because I'm not the expert here, but I'm surely, and the organisation that I use, that is actually talking to the individuals involved, you know, and checking back in on it. A problem, you know, if there is an issue, it doesn't go away in one conversation, you know, and even if they say it's gone away in one conversation, it hasn't, you know. So actually the processes that help you monitor, okay, where are we? The things that we put in place to help you, have they actually helped you? Have things changed? Has something else popped its head up? Or did the problem that we thought was there in the first place, is it a different issue? So I think that is down to processes, but I will stand here and say I'm definitely not the expert on that in this room, because I have got two experts who are living, breathing and sleeping that all the time.
Deborah mentioned systems and checking in and monitoring, but do we have a responsibility to check in and monitor ourselves? I mean, should I be thinking, did I have a coffee break today? Did I go for a walk? Have I, oh God, I've been on the screen now for 2 hours without, gazing up. How do we do that? How do we monitor ourselves?
That's a really great question. I'm probably not the right person to answer that, because I'm the one who forgets to take a coffee break and I forget to go for a walk. And I remember later on at night when I'm thinking, why is my back quite so achy? So I think there's something about empowering people to do the right thing. And to go back to the early question about how do you measure and how do you monitor, when you put interventions in, there's always something about going back and making sure they're working. And if they're not, so if you're going to put in, health checks or something like that around people's physical health, make sure that they're not just a tick box exercise, that they're actually driving health improvements, and you can measure that by uptake and also how their health improves. So be really careful when you put in wellbeing interventions in, that they're not just because you think you should, that they're actually going to drive health improvements. So that's really important.
And Guy, what about incentives? So, the obvious one would be, gym memberships, cycle to work schemes, when you all of those things. Would you encourage that?
Yes, we offer both of those at Nestlé. We also private health for most people, and people can buy in on that, and private dentistry as well, where you can buy. We know where we can buy products. Offering a full range of products that and benefits that people can choose which benefits they buy. It's called cafeteria benefits, i.e. you can pick and choose them. And we offer that as part of our thinking. So we have a total reward strategy. It's not just salary that we focus on. And if you look at the benefits that people can buy, a lot of them are towards personal health, well-being and wellness.
And presumably you'd extend that to the family as well. It's not just about us. The knock-on is family and people you live with.
Very much so, and dependents of all sorts, and of course now we are very open in terms of what's described as the family as well.
We've got a question from the audience. So, what's your question to our experts?
Hi. So my question is, having a small business, you often find yourself overworking. How can you reduce the risk of feeling burnt out, especially if you don't have a big team to delegate your tasks?
Great question. Yeah, burnout, overworking. You're the boss, but you're also the person that packs the boxes and all the other things as well, Deborah.
Fact of life is, when you do start a business, I mean, it makes me laugh because people say, one of the reasons I've started my own business is I wanted my own independence and I wanted to run my own life. And boy, does it not feel like that when you start, because actually the business is running you. It's like having a newborn child. If you don't feed it, it's just not going to survive. So there is a reality in that, but there are also things that you can do. My observations are that when you start a business, you think everything is incredibly important and you have to do it now. And there's this fear of kind of, I just have to run. If I put that back, it won't happen. So I think taking the time to genuinely stop and think, hold on a minute, not only are these the things that I know I have to do, I have to say how important they are and what their time scales are. And that helps you get rid of this feeling, I've got so much to do and I have to do it all today. And it helps unburden that feeling of feeling overwhelmed. So again, give yourself a bit of a break. I say that to myself, son, oh, give yourself a break. You know, I actually say that to myself. Give yourself a break. Well, nobody can do all of that in one fell swoop. Prioritize, you know, just work out and give yourself reasonable timescales. Because all of those things you think are incredibly important, when you logically think about it, some of them really can happen a bit later.
Burnout, people who are perhaps also workaholics, people who don't want to stop working, they feel like they've got a point to prove.
Yeah, and very common in the early stages of businesses. We know this. The one bit of advice I would give you is that, you know, in the developed world, 5 days a week, 35 to 40 hours a week is a standard working week. That hasn't happened by accident. That is when people are at their optimum level. It's not optimum for everybody. Some it's less, some it's more. But it's around that number. So set that as your target to work and understand what you need to do in that time and then stop. Because otherwise you won't be productive for very long and you'll have a completely negative effect.
And June, in terms of our own way of working, I was always better in the evenings and even at weekends, bank holidays. I don't want to go and stand with all the other queues on a bank holiday. That degree of flexibility we should afford ourselves, shouldn't we? To say, do you know what, I'm good at 6 a.m. or I'm great at midnight, but I need to rest the rest of the time.
And I think that's a great point, because quite personally, I'm a really morning person. I can be up at 5 and I'm at my most productive before everyone comes online about 8 o'clock. But by 3 o'clock, I'm not really doing much good. But I've done my hours. So, you know, I make sure I push the work that I really want to do earlier in the morning. Quite often you can't do that in a manufacturing job, because you can't choose when you're going to work, because you're told when to turn up. So I think it's about, you know, acknowledging that and acknowledging, you know, this is what my role is, but then thinking about, why did you set up that business? You know, what do you want from it in the end? Why are you doing it? And what brings you joy about it? And giving yourself time to take those joyful moments. Because if you don't, what on earth are you working for? You're not really working to, you know, make the world a better place. You also want to make it better for you. So just think about what brings you joy. But I think it's a really good point. The hybrid way of working has been really, really helpful. But let people know what your style is.
Thanks to our experts for sharing their insights and advice on workplace wellbeing. If you'd like further tips, visit nestleprofessional.co.uk.